Welcome back to the Chad Hasty Show, News Talk KFYO. It's now time we go to the phones and visit with our good friend, editor of quorumreport.com. It's Scott Braddock. Scott, good morning. How are you doing today?
Doing well, Chad. I missed y'all last week, but I have a chance to win a new recliner now, apparently.
Hey, there you go. Absolutely.
Nothing wrong with that. We're all, sitting at home.
Yeah.
Couch potatoes, leaning back, watching some TV, not as much sports as we're used to, but hey.
Well, we can all sit back and enjoy the Democrat National Convention, which is, it's going to look completely different. For those who are used to watching conventions, you'd have to watch C-SPAN if you wanted to see the entire thing. Now, Scott, it's a 2-hour a night type deal, and that's it.
And I think one thing the pandemic is doing is it's forcing these conventions into some sort of form that they were always going to go anyway, because, look, the business of the party, and this is true for Republicans and Democrats, it doesn't really happen as much at the actual convention anymore.
Yeah.
Not in modern times. I mean, there was a time when they would fight it out at the convention for who the nominee of the party was going to be. All the backroom deals, we would hear about the smoke-filled rooms and all that. Doesn't really happen anymore, and for the time that you and I have been, as adults in politics watching all this, it's basically a 3 or 4 day infomercial for the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. And that's basically what you're going to get. And, of course, you remember the Texas Democratic Party convention online, right? No, not at all, because you didn't watch it, and most people didn't watch it. It was, for the, it was only online, for their virtual convention, although they did get some praise for being much more smooth in their operations than the Republican Party of Texas, which had quite a few glitches in the online convention. One thing that's stood out to people around here, and you saw that the chairman of the Texas Democratic Party, Gilberto Hinojosa, was not happy about this. Democrats from Texas don't have big speaking roles at all.
No, and I thought Texas was a swing state and going to be focused on by Joe Biden.
That's what we were told, and, it may still be the case, but as far as the convention is concerned, just not true. 2 North Texas Republicans are going to participate in this sort of aggregation of a keynote address. It's supposed to be young Democrats from across the country. A state representative by the name of Victoria Neave and Congressman Colin Allred, both going to be part of sort of a montage of young Democrats speaking during the keynote, sort of a keynote address. But, this is a new way to do this. I saw where some people were saying that it was sort of diminishing to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the congresswoman from New York, that she only gets 1 minute to speak during this thing. But it's basically a YouTube video, Chad. It's not like standing in front of a crowd and giving a speech.
Yeah.
And in fact, in a lot of ways, if you're hoping that your moment goes viral, which of course could very well happen with her, it's happened a lot since she's taken office, that's what you want, is about a 1 minute YouTube video that you could put out. So it's just a completely different way of thinking about all this.
Yeah, and I mean, this whole thing is going to be different, and I do wonder how, some of these speeches are going to go, because you've got speeches that are going to be taking place from all over the U.S.
Yeah.
Joe Biden, and I'm sure you watched when he introduced Kamala Harris as his VP. The one thing that I've noticed is that Joe and the speechwriters are still writing the speeches like you were in a very busy filled room, right? Where you can tell where the pauses are for applause and everything else.
Yeah.
And we're still having, when I say we, I mean, the political apparatus and speechwriters and candidates are having to get used to, okay, I've got to give a speech without anyone in the room who's going to cheer for his speech. And I've got to make it sound, I got to pump people up when, honestly, whether you're Trump or, Kamala or even Biden, I'm sure, any politician feeds off the crowd, and you don't have that now.
100%. And Chad, growing up in radio, that the challenge when you are doing public speaking but there's no crowd in the room, like you're doing right now in the radio studio, you've got to connect with the audience. You've got to sort of overmatch the energy. I remember one of my news directors when I was doing radio news in Houston would say, you've got to pop out of the radio. And that's the same thing that these folks have to do when they're doing one of these video presentations. It can't be the same mindset of waiting for a crowd to applaud or to cheer for you. There is no crowd to do that, and so you have to connect in a very different way. I was thinking about the fact that there was a story about President Trump right after his rally in Tulsa, where he was talking to one of his top aides. That may have been Jared Kushner, but the point was that in their conversation they were talking about which were the lines that the president said to the crowd that got the crowd fired up. Well, he's not able to test out the messages that are connecting with his audience if he can't talk in front of a live crowd. So it's a challenge for both sides.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So do you think the leaving out of, Beto O'Rourke, he's not even, I don't think he's even invited, and he was supposed to be one of the rising stars. In fact, Biden said he was going to be, maybe part of the administration. He's not there. Mm-hmm. Leaving out Texas, does this, in your mind, does that kind of show that maybe the Biden folks are not that all in on Texas really being a swing state?
I'm not sure, what the real commitment is to Texas just yet. We keep seeing all these polls that show that there's a competitive race in Texas for president, although most of those still show the president is ahead. The President Trump is ahead of Biden. And look, no matter what happens at this convention and moving forward, once you get into the real campaign season, because these conventions generally signal the beginning of the general election, you'll see what resources are actually going to be spent on various states. And Texas continues for Democrats to be just a bad investment for a variety of reasons. One, Republicans still lead here generally. Number two, it's such a big state and it's so expensive with big media markets, almost 30 million people across 254 counties and 2 time zones. To move the needle at all, you need a ton of cash. Look at what O'Rourke was able to do in that U.S. Senate race, where he spent about $80 million, Chad, and still lost. And so you don't have a presidential campaign with that kind of money laying around that they don't need in other states, which are better bets. For example, North Carolina is trending toward the Democrats, which would not have even been true, a couple of cycles ago. But they would much rather spend a few $1 million there and pick up those electoral votes rather than try to spend $60 million in Texas and get zero out of it, right? And so they're going to put more money into places like Florida, North Carolina, and some of those other potential swing states, and particularly looking to get the Rust Belt back. That's one of the reasons for Biden's candidacy. Strategically speaking, Biden is somebody who speaks to those places that Trump was able to flip for Republicans that Democrats want to get back, like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan.
Speaking of polling data, there was a new poll that came out, I guess, this morning on the Hispanic vote in Texas.
Yeah, interesting. And again, one of these polls that shows that President Trump is leading in Texas. But I think the point that these numbers make is that Hispanic voters can't be taken for granted in this state. You had Hillary Rodham Clinton, lead with Hispanics in Texas by almost 30 points. She was plus 27 back in 2016 with Hispanic voters, even though she was down 9 in the overall vote. In this, the president, this was put out by the Texas Hispanic Policy Foundation, which is headed up by our friend, former State Representative Jason Villalba from Dallas. And they put this out, and it has Trump up by 7 overall in Texas. But get this, Biden leads with registered Hispanic voters, but only by 9.5%, nowhere close to what Clinton was getting. And so if you read through the analysis on this, the point that becomes sort of apparent is that if Biden could do better with Hispanics than he's doing now, and could perform at the same sort of level that Clinton did in 2016, then President Trump would have a real problem, because the overall number for Trump is smaller now than it was when he finished by plus 9 points in 2016. And what they're sort of arguing here in the analysis is that you can't take the Hispanic voters for granted, and both sides need to do everything they can to try to earn that vote.
Scott, it seems to me that when it comes to the Hispanic vote in Texas, the national guys, they don't know quite well how to read the room. That, and let's say, I guess it's easy to say that, the statewide candidates are always going to know best how to, how the folks in the state are going to vote, or which way they may lean. But it seems like it's such a gap between leaders in Texas, being able to connect with the Hispanic vote, and then the national guys seem to come in and think that maybe everyone is just supposed to vote Democrat, or it's supposed to work this way because that's the way it works in California.
Yeah, and it's never been the case. Hispanic voters are not monolithic. They don't all agree about all of these issues. All of the polling data I've ever seen about Hispanic voters in Texas shows that they break down about the same way as voters at large, and it just go across the issues, Chad. Whether you're talking about abortion, gay rights, gun rights, the environment, the economy, religion, the military, the big things. It is not something where this group all feels the same way about things. Yeah. There's also, to your point about California, there's also quite a lot of studies that have been done on the fact that Hispanic people are more likely to quickly assimilate in whatever place they move to, and so there is the fact that you do have a lot of Hispanic people in Texas who are more conservative because they get to Texas, they look around, and that's what's here, an entrepreneurial spirit to people who are conservative, people who vote Republican. And if you look at California, it's more liberal with people who are Democrats, and so they tend to assimilate to the situation they're in. Problem for Republicans with Hispanic voters for a long time, especially since 2006, is that there are a lot of people in the Republican Party, including President Trump, who have taken a very hardline stance on immigration. Immigration is something that does impact a lot of Hispanic people directly because they are either immigrants or they have somebody in their family who is an immigrant. Although something that's shifting on that, and some Democrats will admit this, by the way, is that once someone has been here, second generation, third generation, et cetera, they don't think of themselves as immigrants anymore. And so when they hear attacks on immigrants, they hear it as that's an attack about somebody else other than me and my family. And when they think of immigrants, they think of that as being someone else, even though they may have an immigrant story in their family.
Interesting. Scott, tell folks what you're working on over at Quorum Report.
We got a breakdown of all this, and there are more polls coming out all the time giving us some sort of an indication of what's going to happen. And I would argue, I've argued this online, and we'll talk about it on quorumreport.com, that it is still quite possible, Chad, that President Trump can carry Texas by 4, 5, 6 points, but Democrats can take the majority in the Texas House. And there's going to be a lot more information coming out on that coming up. We've got it all for you at quorumreport.com. You can sign up for our free emails there and subscribe by clicking subscriptions on the homepage at quorumreport.com.
All right, very well. Thank you very much, Scott, and enjoy the week.
Thanks, man. We'll talk soon.
All right, that's Scott Braddock, editor, quorumreport.com.